Okay, hello everyone. We are doing a Wolfram language design brainstorming session about a very old topic, notebook programming. Um, Actually, I have a question for John before we get started on that, which is
hmm
about the Stylesheet repository. And I was being told that there is something has to be implemented. I don't know whether that's relevant to this at all, but to allow sort of a delivered style sheet to get used in a notebook. Is that
Yeah,
is that a
I'm not sure that Stylesheet repository is any longer worth our doing.
hmm, okay?
Um, the uh, because I mean, there are two kinds of things you can do. One is, you can make visual changes. The other is you can have, utility style sheets or whatever.
Hmm.
There are not that many utility style sheets in the world. And a lot of what we might want to do with visual changes is going to be covered by our upcoming work on themes. And I think that that should inform any discussion of this before we go and do a big build out of something that maybe isn't going to be that useful in the end.
Okay. I mean, the main issue is when somebody has a exotically styled notebook and they send it to somebody else, then the person doesn't have a way to get the style sheet.
Yeah, I claim that happens rarely because style sheet, even style sheet tweaking is something of a high wire act.
I kind of
Uh,
agree, partly
and
because the
and
style
and
sheet
and
editor is pretty crummy.
and that's but I mean it's not crummy because we're terrible lazy people. It's crummy because there's a lot of stuff going on in there, and it's very difficult to
Yeah,
to distill that complexity, which
I
is
agree.
inherent to to the nature of what's going on.
All right, that's interesting. That informs some stuff for the global project list. Okay.
Yeah. So I think, we are going to be talking more about theme stuff in the not so distant future. And in that context, I think there's more discussions, useful discussions to be had here.
Okay. All right, let's talk about notebook programming. This is our main topic. Um, the issue is, okay, what let's first of all let's review for a second what the current notebook programming primitives are and so on.
Okay. Well, so just to frame this again, there are two big picture ways to think of doing notebook programming. One is you read in the expression, you symbolically manipulate the expression.
Yep. And the
Uh,
other is you poke at it like a oh my God, what are those things called? Like a
yeah,
DOM.
that it's actually an open thing in yes, it's dumb. Like you open it in the front end. The front end exposes various reference objects to you that you can then work with.
Wouldn't it be
Um,
nice if those worked the same way?
it's not at all clear to me that that makes sense.
Okay. Well, I mean, the
But
issue is,
but there are many things that, well, no, I guess not. So something like, if you have a reference object, for example, you can do, current value or set options or options or whatever. But those kinds of things don't tend to work in symbolic manipulation.
well, okay,
Um,
let's talk about two different models here. So, I mean, you know, most of what people do, I think, most of what is really convenient in our language is one gulp computations. Function, you apply a function, you get a result. You apply a function, you get a result. Because we can represent things symbolically, that gives a lot of power. But things where you have a pointer, you've got a stream pointer and an open file and so on. I think that's only used at a pretty low level. Do people agree with that? We're mostly dealing with you apply a function, it's a one gulp operation. Comments?
mm, and
I think
not
in general, yes, but the low level stuff is super important when it matters.
Yes, I understand that. But the question is anybody other than the sort of machine code level programmers using it? Because there's no point in it. Okay, let me put it this way. There are things which are too grotesque for most people to use, and so people don't use them. And then we clean them up, and they're beautiful and easy to use, and then lots of people use them. There are things that are too low level for people to use, and we go to a lot of effort to make them cleaner, and still nobody uses them.
Very true.
Right? So, and what is it that makes people? I mean, like for example, notebook import. I find myself using that a lot. Okay, what is my use case? I create a thing in a notebook, and then I want to manipulate it. I want to do something now. Okay, so what is the part that I find difficult with that? Spitting
Well,
it back
well,
out into a notebook is somewhat
yeah.
difficult.
And notebook import, you say manipulated. I actually, it's not at all clear to me that notebook import is a tool for manipulation. Notebook import is a fine tool, but it does not have a good round trip
I agree. So,
use
so let me
case.
say what I usually use it for. I'll have prepared something in a notebook because it's a convenient way to edit things. Then I want to do some analysis on it. Perhaps I want to edit it, in which case I have to do the slightly grotesque thing of doing a bunch of cell prints, right? Which is not a good solution. And that we would like a better solution for, I think. But to me, the common case is that I'm getting from notebook import something that is not terribly structured. It's just a list or something. See what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
let's look at the use
Well,
case.
and I would say more generically that notebook import is a great tool for analysis, but not a great tool for manipulation.
Well, I agree, but okay, so look, notebook import, um, notebook import to, analysis, and then what? And then there's the question of, can we add good output? Question mark. And the next question is, notebook import brings things in an unstructured way, right?
Yeah.
And what we've been talking about is it useful if we could bring it in? Okay, so in what form is it useful to have stuff from a notebook, right? So let's take this notebook as an example. Let's see how I can do this. Let's say notebooks. So I'm going to show you a typical use case that I would have for this, okay? Okay, there we go. Notebook import. And then this is my typical thing. So I don't know whether we should allow notebook import of quotes modernize. Should that work? Should it only work from a notebook object? By the way,
Well, it
I'd like to make a comment here about something which I've been meaning to mention.
it does work from a notebook expression. So
Yeah, okay, I get it.
it doesn't work from a
John,
file name.
I'm going to make another comment.
Yeah.
See this? I'm trying to select this thing, and I'm having a really hard time with that because I have to go into that tiny little space there, and then I drag select it. Maybe this is something for the user assistance meeting.
There's a bigger picture issue. This has to do with template box generally, and yeah, this isn't the first time we've talked about it, but I wouldn't say that we've cracked this yet.
Okay, can we put that in the user assistance meeting, please?
Yeah.
Talk
Yeah.
about it. I think I might have sent something recently about exactly that. Okay, so there. It's funky. Why didn't that work? Oh, is that not a text cell?
It's an item cell.
What the hell is that?
Yeah, it's giving you a list of strings, although it's a little weird to look at because some of the strings have commas, and the list, of course, has
No, but what's
commas.
this?
The first one has an inline cell.
See? That's the weird thing. Right? That's really weird. Is that really the right thing, Lou, for it to have done that rather than to have a cell object?
A cell object?
But no, a cell object doesn't make any sense.
It could coerce even the inline cell, attempt to coerce even the inline cell to text if that's a meaningful
I think it should.
thing. But then it's at odds with itself, right? I mean, by default, expressions, box data cells are supposed to be notebook imported.
How did this work? Is this like this? Is that correct?
Don't think it's plural.
Cell, singular.
Okay. Now, what would I do? So, I mean, this is where I start getting into all kinds of weird stuff. Okay. Let's again, what we're talking about is a common thing is gulp in a notebook, do something to it, and push it out again, which we don't have, as you say, that good round trip technology.
Yeah.
The other thing is, and this is relevant for UI building, I think, is the DOM-like, it's open, do something with it. Am I making sense?
Well, and in general, I mean, we have a number of ways that so like for example, something that you might want to do here is you might want to say, so give me both the the text or cell expression or whatever the case may be, but also give me the cell object so that I can so that I have a DOM node to hook onto.
Right. By the way, I'm sorry. Why doesn't this autocomplete? It should.
Um, it's that's kind of a weird pathological case of autocompletion. That's not a standard type of
I know.
autocompletion that we could
I'm
just
just
do.
saying, I understand. I'm just adding it to the list. Things
Yeah.
that should autocomplete. Okay. So you're saying here, I don't know whether I can say item cell. You're saying we could return here a handle to the live creature.
Yeah, and then based on the analysis of the contents, we might choose to perform an operation on the corresponding cell object.
That's an interesting idea. So Lou, what would be the name here that gives you the active cell? What is it called to get to the cell handle?
Well, the handle is called cell object, but we would want multiple things being returned at the same time, right? We
Yeah,
would
okay.
want
So we'd have
both,
to have a list there.
right?
But I
And
mean,
and actually, we don't have a way to return cell object at all because notebook import isn't necessarily working on open notebooks. Remember, a
I
cell
get it.
object
I
Right.
get it.
only makes sense on an open
So
notebook.
it just says not available, failure not available.
Yeah, but that's why it hasn't been done, is because
Right.
of that conceptual limitation.
Right. But it seems like so if we had that, that's a way of mixing DOM-like behavior with gulp, you know, with one shot type behavior.
Yeah.
I like that idea. I think it's a great idea.
Would it
So-
somehow only work on open notebooks, or would it like open the notebook if it's not
No,
open?
it would not open the notebook. It would just say failure. It would just produce a message, can't get the cell object, the notebook is not open.
And
Boom.
there's a related thing like this. Even when you're doing symbolic manipulation, where oh, I want to look for a pattern, but this pattern I only want it to work if it's inside of another pattern, and maybe if that's inside of another pattern, and this becomes awkward, particularly then when you found the thing that you want, and you say, now I want to replace that. In the expression, and it's the documentation build system is doing this sort of thing, and it's always a bit awkward.
Okay, let me make a few other comments. These dates, okay? In modern times, is our date processing efficient enough that we could actually store these as dates, or does that not make sense?
The
I think it would increase the memory quite a lot because data object would store more things.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, there are already problems with that, which are technical, and I don't want to get into. And doing what you're asking increases the problems in a way that affects every user. So,
Okay, all right, fine. But there's a way of getting back these cell chain chimes, right? What is that now? We put in a thing.
notebook, what is it? Notebook history data?
Notebook cell data.
Notebook cell data.
How do I get it for the whole notebook or something?
Just call it with 0 arguments.
Okay, so this is another interesting object, right? Because this is a thing that we could imagine sort of, is that a data set right now? Yes.
By default, yes.
Looks
Yeah.
like it.
I mean, this is an example of a okay, let's review what we've got. We've got the raw out in memory notebook. We've got the generic notebook expression. Okay, so let's say forms of notebooks. And we say, in memory. Then we say notebook expression. Then we say, notebook import unstructured data. We've got semi-structured data, e.g. notebook cell data. And then we've got tree forms. What else do we have?
There are probably things that are escaping me.
We have form
We have
notebooks.
pointer.
Yeah, form notebooks have been a disappointment to me. I thought I'd be using them all the time. And I really haven't. How do I even create one?
File new.
Yeah, these are surprisingly underused by me, at least. Have you guys been using this?
Not at all.
No, I haven't.
In my opinion, there are friction points here that could be dealt with, but I haven't prioritized dealing with them because I'm not 100% confident that if we solved all the friction points, that I still would, whether I still would be using it or not.
Well, okay, let's talk about the cases where this could have been used. Okay, like repository. By the way, can these be generated to the cloud?
Yeah, at the bottom there, storing cloud object.
Yeah, I understand that, but does this allow? Yeah, I mean,
but let's remember the duality that I've expressed before, that form notebooks are a way to start with a notebook and end with data, and template notebooks are a way to start with data and end with a notebook. They're basically the inverse of one another.
wait a minute, you have that the wrong way around. A template notebook starts with data and ends with a notebook.
That's what I said.
I thought you said it the other way around. Well, anyway,
No.
okay, so let's okay, so we've got notebook generators here, and we've got template notebooks. They are fancy formatting for data, basically.
Yes, I agree with that.
And then we've got form notebooks, which are, enter your data in a fancy way.
Yeah.
But then get the entered data out. So this is kind of like, now, just so I understand, if I try to deploy one of these things on the web, is Jean Pacey here? Can he respond to this? Will it work? Does it end up as a thing that is like a web form or not?
I don't know. I haven't tried it myself, actually.
That's fine.
I know that the last time I checked, and I don't think much has happened since then, template notebooks were not in great shape on the web, but form notebooks I don't know anything about.
Well, that's the thing to check into.
Well, if you're on the web, wouldn't you want to use something like form function or form page?
Well, that's the whole point, that this allows you to do much fancier things. This allows you to really put in notebook content. So, for example, a form notebook should be usable as a way to do a repository.
Well, that's not necessarily true. I mean, the form functions, are pretty good for the web. What is the point of a form notebook over a form function? The point of a form notebook is not that you can just enter the data and then kind of throw away the document around it and now you have the data. The point is now you have a document that you can open up again. If you didn't care about opening up the document again, form function would be perfect.
No, I don't think so. Because let's say you actually want to, do something like submit a thing for a repository. You need complicated notebook content. You've got a bunch of examples. In other words, this is useful. Okay, so just to be clear, this is e.g. useful when you want to enter notebook structured material. That's one of the use cases here.
Well, I think I would claim that your suggestion actually isn't so far from what I'm saying, in the sense that, when you hike up the complexity of the material, you need to make sure that you have, a way to checkpoint it, to structure it, that sort of thing. Because,
Sure.
because the cost of, I've had this happen, some form
Yeah, right.
page
Okay.
where the web browser crashes or something, and I've
Right.
lost
Also
tons.
need to be able to store the form in creation, so to speak. I have a question. Do we know whether the resource system people have even considered using Form Notebook as a way to have a submission notebook?
I looked at that a long time ago, and it doesn't really make sense.
Why?
It well, the original version of the data repository submission notebook was actually similar to a form notebook. We didn't have form notebooks yet, but it's the same idea. It had a lot of form-like things in it with like structured parts, and you would basically fill it out like a form, but nobody could really figure out how to use it. And so we kind of switched to just a structured notebook where each section is just arbitrary notebook content. And we figure out how to parse that into whatever data we
I
need.
know, but I thought Form Notebooks were supposed to be able to do that, to parse the thing.
Well, there's a range of foot gunning in this. You can have a form that is quite constrictive of what the user can enter, but then there's, it's not as utilitarian for kind of, like in the case of, the resource repositories. I mean, if it's just like an expression, sure, that's something you can easily drop into a form. But if it's something document-like, then it's having a constrictive form. Just you keep running into the walls around you.
Yeah. I mean,
And that means that sometimes you might be capable of creating form content that the system processing is going to kind of puke out and say, I don't understand what you tried to do here, because you change the document so substantively that I can't process
okay,
it.
let me give you an example. Let's say you're writing computational essays, but you want some metadata for each essay.
Mhm.
You should be able to use a form notebook for that. In other
Sure.
words, you've got metadata at the top, and then everything underneath is just a simple and okay, John Casey,
Well,
yeah.
yeah. So you mean kind of rather fixed stuff like abstract, author,
Yeah,
date,
exactly.
URL.
Yes, structured data, and then you go free form after that. Now, I can see places where on the web that would make sense. I mean, both in product and on the web, but there's no point in even doing it in product. I mean, I've got a couple of projects coming up where this could be used. This is a way, instead of making a full heavyweight resource system, play, this is something where, so let's determine whether this works in the cloud. Okay, John, could you do that, please?
Okay, who normally owns the form notebook stuff we can talk to?
I'm not sure there is a current owner. Lou, do
Well,
you
I
know
think
if there's a
I
current
think
owner?
it's in Bob's.
I think it's in Bob's. Yeah.
So Bob is the answer.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so I want to add something else here, which is dashboards, which we don't have right now, and which are most relevant on the web. And I think as a project we're going to be pushing. And I don't know how that relates to any of this, and whether, should they come from notebooks, or should they just come from or just from data, or just from pure data. Do you understand what I'm saying? In other words, if you're designing a dashboard, should you design it in a notebook or should you design it in code? My guess is that it should be done in code. Anybody want to comment on that, please?
I mean, that's where I've started for some sort of mini dashboards that I've done.
Okay.
It sort of feels like the difference between when you're working in some low level system like Qt, something like that. That you can write code to build the interface top to bottom, or you can use some kind of interface editor that allows you to more easily express without having to kind of come up with like all the specific margin values and that sort of thing. The static contents and the placeholder values.
You know what I think? I think that this is something which is sort of the future of our information visualization stuff. And I think our consistent experience has been writing code is what people find much more useful. Whenever we built kind of a pseudo WYSIWYG thing for doing stuff, it hasn't been, other than notebooks as documents, which have been super useful over the last 40 years or whatever, that seems like it's not useful. Does that make sense to people? So in other words, this is not a use case for some kind of notebook generator thing. Do you agree? Do you disagree?
No, I'm not going to argue otherwise. I'm not sure if I agree or disagree, but I'm certainly not prepared to take the opposite side. Let's put it that way.
Okay. That's, by the way, dashboards. I hope they're on the project list, and that's something that needs to get resourced. And could somebody send that to Tracy?
Yeah.
Yes.
Relevant to a meeting I have this afternoon. Okay. So let's talk about the tree version here. So Piotr, I think you had done, I mean, what's the current work on that?
Well, we put it on hold. I mean, I had it is in the prototype that there is an import element called cell tree.
Okay.
For the notebook, for the NB format.
Did it get more useful than it was when I tried it before, when it wasn't useful?
No, it's
okay.
I didn't do anything.
Okay, well, but I mean, do we have a design, or is this something that is undesigned?
Well, I thought that we tried to design it in these meetings. So
okay,
no,
fine, that's fine. I mean, but there's no existing design for it, correct?
Not really. It had something together with, I think Lou suggested some, prototype implementation, and that's what I added.
Okay.
But again, you didn't like it, so we should.
Well, I think we need to know. I mean, again, if it's too complicated, it's going to defeat itself. Right. So what would we want to do? So let's say our workflow is you gulp the notebook in as a tree. Okay. And then you do something to it. I mean, and then, conceivably there are analogous operations. I mean, so you gulp it in as a tree, then you walk along the tree.
So one of the complexities here, which we've kind of obliquely hit on in previous meetings, but I don't think I've said it directly in this way, is that sometimes you care about cell group structure, sometimes you don't care about cell group structure. If you don't care about cell group structure and you're getting the cell group structure in there, it's really a pain in the butt to work with.
Sorry,
And
I got distracted.
You should have a notebook that shows both versions.
Where is that? Is
It's
that
in
on
the
this?
notebook programming folder. I think it's just
Okay.
called notebook programming. So this cell tree is what Piotr was talking about. That preserves the cell group structure. And then further down, not that one, but this one, this is what expression tree does with notebooks. And this isn't trying to replicate the cell group structure. It's just mimicking the actual symbolic structure of a notebook.
But so like we ended up adding this option to notebook import because like sometimes you want the structure because you care about it. But if you don't care about it, boy, is it a pain in the butt if you get it and didn't want it.
Sorry, what? Okay, the issue is in notebook import. Okay, so notebook import fundamentally is giving you fairly generic data structures like lists.
Yeah, well, but it's giving you a flat list
I
by
know.
default. There
Right.
is an option called strip cell grouping. And this option is it's like if someone set strip cell grouping to the thing you didn't want, it creates all kinds of trouble, basically. I'm just pointing out that I don't think we can say, we always deal with cell group structure or we never deal with cell group structure. We have to deal with both scenarios.
Yeah. Well, okay, but so how would you like the cell group structure when you pull it into the language? What would you like it to be? What is the best way for it to be structured so that
I
it is
mean,
the most useful?
most of the time when I'm processing notebooks, I don't want the cell group structure.
No, I agree. I usually
Yeah.
don't either, but sometimes I do.
Yeah.
And what? Okay, so let's give an analogy which I think has worked fairly well, which is
And
file
what we're
system
doing
scan.
right now is just nested lists for notebook import. It's nothing more than nested lists.
Okay, but file system scan. Okay, so this is a question. If we want, structured import of notebooks, okay, what forms are useful? Potentially useful forms. Okay, we've got nested lists, structured imports, and the main objective here is preserve the cell group structure, right? Cell group structure, that's one thing. Preserve the cell styles, that's another thing. And then another thing is inline cells, etc. Right? Those are all things you might want to preserve or not preserve.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else you might want to preserve or not preserve?
Well, I mean, the question is how far you want to go. I mean, you can go all the way down to the boxes that you might want to preserve.
I see. Okay. Okay, so potentially useful forms, nested lists. I could imagine a form that is associations with section headings with section headings as keys. Does that seem useful to people?
Yeah.
Assuming that you don't have duplicate section headings or some way to uniqueify them.
Good point. That's a reason why it shouldn't be associations. So it'd be lists of rules. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, and in addition to that, I mean, I don't actually have a great understanding of ordering in associations. You know, if it's,
They stay ordered when they can.
but
look,
is it easy or hard to like insert something in the middle, for example?
it's not super easy.
Whereas it's much easier with lists, I think.
Yeah, right. Fair enough. Okay, so nested lists.
I just linked a function that's kind of relevant. It's basically the inverse of what we're talking about, I think. So this one, you give it associations and like structured data, and it creates the notebook expression for you. Having something going the other way, I think, would be pretty handy as well.
Okay, so hold on, let me understand this. I don't get this. What is this doing?
So the keys of the association, those start out as the content of the section cells. But then if the value of one of those things is another association, it goes into a subsection. So it recursively defines a notebook from nested associations.
I see. Okay, so this is
So Rick,
This
you were the
is-
one who wrote this. I'm just curious what you were trying to achieve.
This one I actually use almost every day still. It's just for taking a chunk of data, like a mix of associations, lists, and stuff like that, and just make something that's easy to read in a notebook form.
Okay, so it's just looking at the raw expression is too visually or informationally dense. You just need a way to better process it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
What about data set to notebook? I mean, this is so. I mean, again, this has the issue of no repeated keys and so on. But one could imagine, okay, so this is then there's nested rule lists, which is basically what you have, right? That's CF WFR association notebook. I mean, so then the question is, is this a viable thing to round trip where you say, I mean, let me give you an example where we have something like this, which is in the theorem proving stuff. Okay, I don't know how many of you have seen this. Yeah, this is actually an interesting example. Um, why hasn't this been modernized? This needs to be rerun. Bug, guys. This was redone in this version.
I'll take care of that.
Okay. Just simply never understand why people do these examples this way. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Okay, so let's go like this, and then this will generate proof object. Okay, and now I can say from this, from that proof object, I can say proof notebook, and it will generate a notebook there in line, which is a little weird. I don't know why does it look so wrong in line relative to what it looks like there?
because there are certain things we just can't properly support in line without a really disproportionate amount of effort.
Okay.
It's mainly cell margins in this case, right?
Yeah, in this case, it's like, yeah, cell margins is a lot of it in this case, but in other cases, I mean, it can be worse. It can be like if you have a notebook with a different style sheet, you can't do that style sheet in line.
I really like this model. See this? I mean, we've got a data set here and we've got a notebook here, and they're both potentially useful.
So nested rules is also a possible input for trees. And
Yes,
so there's also a possible connection there.
I agree.
Yeah. All of these forms can be converted to and from tree.
So, I mean, one thing that is potentially interesting here is, I mean, basically what we're saying is a thing we all think is useful is going from a notebook, which has all its complicated stuff with cell change times and all that kind of thing, into a generic Wolfram language data structure and going back out. Does that make sense to people? That seems like a thing we're identifying as obviously useful.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, let's see.
And so the main thing is having some data structure that's easier to manipulate than working with the raw expression.
Yes, because the notebook expression is very complicated and
Sure.
has a lot of information in it, like, cell change times and
Okay.
box data and so on,
Sure.
that you
Okay.
basically never want.
Okay.
I mean, the notebook expression is intended for notebook display and might have, I mean, what happens if there are certain cells that have yellow backgrounds? You might need that information for processing, or you might just not care.
Okay. Nope. That makes sense. Again, I'm more on the latter camp usually, so that's why I asked. But yeah, it's fine.
Of not care.
Well, no, I have to care because I'm in the business of rendering notebooks. But
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
but yeah.
Okay, but so let's talk about other, uses of notebook programming. I mean, we've run into that. We ran into that with a tutor project. We run into that with Notebook Assistant and so on. What are some examples of other things that make heavy use of notebook programming? Real-time notebook programming.
I mean, when you say other things, I don't know what kind of thing we're talking about.
Well, where have you used selection move? What pieces of code use selection move?
So in general, I've tried to avoid that. Beginning in, I don't know, version 7 or somewhere around there. But before then, basically all of the live transformations of notebooks were, some form of selection move, notebook write, notebook read, et cetera, et cetera. But this is super ugly, and it creates things like, some of the stuff we ended up doing in DocuTools, where it's like, okay, look for such and such thing in a notebook. Now press the right arrow key 23 times, in order to get to something else, and it's just really horrible. And so I much prefer things that can work without changing the selection at all.
But how does that work? Because that's still DOM-based stuff, right?
Yes.
Okay, so where do we use DOM-like notebook programming?
Well, I mean, a big use of that is, anything that is, or, in some kinds of interactive interfaces where, instead of being dynamic oriented, maybe dynamic oriented isn't working for some reason, and we need to do a read write sort of thing.
Well,
Okay,
like
and
the
how
the
big is the chunk?
accept button in Control Equal that replaces an interface with, simpler things.
Great example. Great example.
Okay. How much is this end user? I mean, we're not expecting, are we ever expecting end users to do this?
Well, we make it available to them. We certainly document it for them. And
But it's very grotesque and very
it
complicated,
yeah.
as DOM things tend to be, I think. I mean, we built this stuff decades before things like React.
I think a simpler case is this, and kind of like notebook import is the cells function. the cells function is, if the thing that you're looking for, fits into one of the selectors that cells uses, and if nothing else, you can use cell tags, so you can kind of make content fit into those selectors. Then cells is a great way to get a handle on particular cell level content at the notebook level that you want to uh, you want to do whatever with.
Oh, but I mean, that's like an import format. I mean, cells is giving you, right? It's just giving you
A list of cell objects.
which you could then import. Yes.
Which you can then decide to do whatever you might want to do with it, not necessarily import. You might delete them, you might copy them, you might change their properties
Okay, but then
or
how do you
query
push
their
it back out
properties.
to the live notebook?
Well, I mean, like the properties thing, you can just do current value of a thing, comma, or comma, a property equals new value. So yeah, so take that current value, paste, comma, background, no, and just do like equals purple, or something. And there you go. So
That's nice.
So yes, you can do a full read and full write, but there are other sorts of transformations you can do as well.
Okay, but wait a minute. This might be the reasonable future of notebook programming.
Well, I mean, this handles a subset of tasks, and it handles those tasks really well.
Okay, but so wait a minute. So this is basically what we're talking about here is, this is real time. This is real time modification again.
Yeah.
Um, okay. Well, so hold on. We should wrap this meeting, but I think okay. So look, it seems to me this is one bucket of things. Is notebooks to generic data structures and back again.
Mhm.
The second bucket of things is making it more convenient. Now, so we can bridge these by returning the cell objects as part of an import here so that you can do your analysis and then say, well, actually, I want to push out something here. Okay, take that object and replace it with this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that will be the minority case. The majority case is it's like a data warehouse. You're just pulling it in and analyzing it.
Mm-hmm.
And the push back out. I mean, in other words, if I reset, how do I reset a cell object? Can I rewrite a cell object?
You can notebook write over it.
Okay, but so that might be a mechanism we want something cleaner for. Or is it the case that I can just say notebook write of a cell object?
I mean, it's pretty clean, except that there is some confusion about, if you're using something like expression cell or text cell or something like that, that's not necessarily going to end happy. But if you're working with, kind of the raw cell box language, etc., then yes, that works brilliantly.
Like a common thing to do, I think, is notebook read a cell object perform some replacements on it, some transformation, whatever, and then just notebook right back to its original cell object, the new one.
Exactly. Exactly.
So if I say notebook read, okay. That seems reasonably civilized. I mean, the thing is, okay, just a general knowledge question. In something like React, it is a very DOM-based system. True or not true? John Pacey?
Not really in how people write React code or other stuff. I mean, you do have to understand DOM at some point, but these days most things you don't really care about the full DOM structure or
Okay, so how does it work? I mean, because it's solving similar problems to the ones we have here, right? And what you're telling me is maybe people have gone away from. Go ahead.
I would say no, it doesn't really, it's not solving similar things here. Like it just abstracts over the DOM so you don't have to care about most of it.
In what way? So, I mean, in other words, if I have a web page and it's an active web page and I have a piece of JavaScript that's going to change a piece of the web page, how does that work?
I mean, there's all kinds of sort of abstract framework. Most people sort of take built up frameworks and sort of do things there. It depends on how complicated.
Okay, let's be specific. We've got some web page and we've got something where we want some opener on the web page,
Yeah.
where the effective HTML of the page wants to change when you press a button.
There are like 1,000 different ways to do that.
Okay, fair enough. But I'm asking you, what is the nice, clean way to do it in modern times?
There's like still a million ways to do that.
Okay, what would you think was the cleanest of them?
Probably web components, because we're in the phase of, you know, a lot of the frameworks are very heavyweight, so there's sort of a pendulum swinging back to more lightweight things that are more pure web, but it depends on.
Okay, so what does that mean? What does it mean? How does that actually work?
So you have to go look at the documentation for how the DOM.
No, I'm not asking that question. I'm asking, you've got a web page, and in the end, the web page is rendered as at some point it's served as HTML.
Yeah.
Right. And something on the server, which is our equivalent of in the kernel, is poking at that web page to change a thing that's on that page.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Typically, people either use WebSockets or you do, which is a persistent connection between both.
Yes.
Or you do, request-based stuff.
Okay, but then what is the request like? What does the request look like?
Usually it's form submission through post or a get.
No, you're not answering my question. But John, do you understand my question at least?
Yes, but I can't answer it. But John, I think what Stephen is asking is, you want to, in the DOM, you want to address a specific node to manipulate it in some way. How are you addressing that node?
So the DOM has an interface with methods that are basically like cells. You can say, has all elements, or you can say, give me an element that has these characteristics, and you get a reference to that. And then you can either replace it or attach or directly modify in a similar way to what current value is doing.
Well, that's not unlike what cells does in my mind. Except the big problem with cells is that it only works with cells. It doesn't work with other units of
like cell groups.
Of content, or like boxes.
So yeah, I was confusing. That's how the DOM works, Stephen. React doesn't really do things that way unless you.
How does it do them? Because how does it? Because what I'm trying to understand is, there are certain patterns for how you do this, how you modify sort of document-like things.
Yeah.
And over time, people have used different ones with different levels of total horror. Okay. We have, we invented what we invented a really long time ago, before any of this stuff existed. But, we invented some of this stuff before the web basically existed. I mean, this was done in the early 90s. Okay. So we have a completely, if we were on the tree of life, we are the archaea, so to speak, not the whatever.
Sure.
But my impression is, so what I'm trying to ask is, at different times, people are like, oh my gosh, this is the most amazing framework for doing things on the web. And I'm trying to understand, is there other discoveries that have been made in how to sort of remote control a document, modify a document-like thing, or is everybody just doing the same old stuff that we've all been doing forever and nothing was really discovered?
So I think it's more the latter, or like people are rediscovering things and calling it some new name that sort of existed before in different
I
paradigms.
see.
There's so yeah, and again, sorry, web is very hostile and there's not great answers for some of these, but ultimately everything's
But
just
what was the between something like Angular and something like React? Was that a change in the paradigm used for DOM manipulation, or is it something complete, or just a rewriting of libraries and cleaner libraries and so on?
Yeah, I think it's just more interfaces to it. The React's original thing was the virtual DOM. Angular has a bit more opinionated in terms of bidirectional. They're sort of orthogonal. React seemed one, but you still have big Angular proponents and other frameworks.
Okay, what is a virtual DOM?
So the React basically built up their own DOM stuff and diffed it so that they could reduce the number of actual DOM operations, because they thought that the cost of doing that was faster than actual DOM manipulations.
I see.
Which
So in other words, so for us, the analogy would be we read the notebook into memory as an expression, we manipulate it there, and then we figure out a diff, which probably we could actually do if we cared, which we might not care. So in other words, that has to do with, does that making sense to people? Lou, you understand what I'm saying? So in other words, we gulp the notebook in as an expression, then we manipulate that expression, and then we say, make it live. And the idea would be that instead of just pushing the whole notebook out in a notebook put, we would instead do a diff.
Yeah, you're talking about the notebook analog of a patch file.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, yeah, the
Is it
difficulty of
actually
that
useful
is,
to us? Or, I mean, in terms of the way our technology is built, is it just as efficient to just do a notebook put?
Well, no, it's definitely not just as efficient. There's
Okay.
a significant overhead to window creation. But even beyond that, we do these sorts of things all the time where, current value has a limited mission, but where that mission applies, it is so much faster than doing a full cell rewrite.
Okay. So this is diffed pushing of notebook expressions, basically. So in other words, if we did that, we're sort of doing the modern, in some sense, thing.
I wouldn't go too much into comparing to React, because for other reasons, well, at least on modern bigger stuff, their assumption that it's always faster is not true. So
okay, fine. But I mean, it might be true for us.
yes. Yeah.
Right. But so that's an idea. That's a thing where we have notebook put right now, but we could have a thing which says, notebook update, let's say, and we've got the NB there, and then we've got, the diffs or something. What would be in the diff system, what would you call that,
Or
Lou?
it could be
Well,
a notebook expression and notebook update diffs.
the function diff apply already exists for the expressions. What we don't have is a mode of diff apply that is object aware.
I see. Diff apply on a live notebook. Or on a live
On a notebook object.
Yeah. Well, that seems
and the first
interesting.
argument is the diff object. But yeah, the target then that you're pointing the diff object at is instead of an expression is the object that you assume matches up with the precursor of of the
Well,
diff
presumably
objects
you
if
could
you
store
can
that
check.
information. Yeah.
You could do some hashing. Yeah.
So maybe this is the right way to do all this stuff. I mean, that basically what we expect is that you are pulling in. I mean, like if that was a diff apply to a cell object, the cell object contains the notebook object, right? It knows which notebook object it comes from, right?
That can be determined. It doesn't contain it, but you can query it.
Okay, fine. But then what we could do, which seems very sensible to me, is that the fundamental paradigm would be you read the thing in, maybe it's just a cell, maybe it's whatever. Now, the other question is, what do you read in? And presumably, a kernel side version of Notebook Find would give you, which we already have, but it's kind of clunky. But the new Notebook Find technology, maybe that would allow us, in other words, the workflow would be basically a Notebook Find like thing. So you find what you want, then you pull in a cell, then you do what you do with it, and using kernel processing, and then you push it out again.
Yeah, I think as we're building our new find technology, I think we'll be capable of doing some interesting new things under, the hood of something like Notebook Find.
And so
So
Notebook Find is
yeah.
kind of like Notebook Import, except it's not gulping the whole thing. It's just finding particular patterns.
Yeah. But, for example, Notebook Find is, it's still Notebook Find is something that really hasn't been modernized. It's,
Yeah.
what it does is it moves the selection,
Yeah, which is
that's
completely crazy.
not so useful. And what's useful is tell me the cell objects this thing is in.
Yeah.
Give me, other metadata about
Well, is
the
it
things
the
being
case?
found.
Do we have cases where we want kernel control of the selection?
Yes, I'm not saying that kernel control of the selection is evil. I'm just saying that it was the original paradigm, and
I
for
know. Yeah.
most things, it is an inferior paradigm.
Right.
That doesn't mean we shouldn't do, make it
All right.
available.
So let's try and summarize here. I mean, and let's we should continue this meeting because I think this is useful, and I think this is really corralling a lot of stuff we've been talking about for years into something reasonable. Okay, so let's survey. Okay, first point is this sort of round trip with generic data structures. Okay, there's more to be done there with tabulars, with nested, rule lists, and so on. So that's step one, and that seems to me to be, that is an extension of Lou's notebook import, and it suggests that we probably want a notebook export as well,
Mhm.
right? And that's so one of the elephants in the jungle is trees, he says, trying to no, but I mean that's one possibility is to have trees as a useful form of notebook import. I am a little skeptical, honestly. I think it's going to get very complicated very quickly.
Why do you say that? Out of curiosity.
Because, well, I don't know, when trees are being used as kind of, I mean, so far, trees being used as kind of mathematical data structure type things, those have been useful. Trees where we try and move in XML and things like this have been fairly horrendous. I mean, I don't know. I think it's very
Well,
general.
I think the visualization is horrendous.
Okay.
But I think I don't know if it's the end all be all of notebook programming, but there's certainly going to be common operations to
Well,
notebook and
give me an
XML.
example that you want to do that is a convenient tree operation on a notebook.
You might want to find all of the subsections with certain content.
Okay, but that's surely a notebook find thing where we're just going to get a list of those subsections.
Right, but it's a similar operation that'll also be useful for other kinds of trees. Tree pattern matching.
Fine. Tree pattern matching is a fine thing, but I don't think that it will be convenient to do that in a tree. I mean, in other words, I think that the tree has the same problems as kind of this external DOM with a lot of complexity inside it. It's not obvious to me. Is anybody want to?
Well,
Anybody else want
so I referenced a bit this pattern matching thing earlier. For example, I might want to make I want to identify cells with certain content, a pattern that I can put together, but only, let's take documentation, for example, only for things that are in the examples section of the documentation.
Yeah, okay.
I don't want that pattern to identify anything outside of that.
Mm-hmm.
Real example, by the way, we've been doing this for dark mode processing of examples.
Okay, so here's a point. So this notebook find could use tree patterns.
And that's the thing that is a little awkward, is like, it's somewhere in the examples group, but you don't know how deep it is, but you want to exclude everything else.
Right.
It's just a bit of pattern replacement stuff.
Okay, let me tell you what we're missing there. Okay.
Not the easiest.
We do not have a pattern that represents. So we have X dot dot. Okay. What we do not have is, a sub X sub X sub X sub X sub X, any number of any depth. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yes.
We could have that. I mean, that would be a general pattern matching construct.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that would do this. That would allow you to say, and that's relevant.
That would help. Yes, it definitely would.
Right. So it would be something like
the XML version of this is XPath, and
yes, I know
that's the model that I want to follow for tree pattern matching.
Right, but we can potentially, right. So, and this should be a project list thing. Okay, this nested function pattern thing. Okay. Can somebody add that, please? Can somebody add that, please?
Yeah, that's for Glory.
Glory, can you respond, please?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so but Ian, we're going to need some. Okay, so I agree that's a very common thing, that you need something at a high level and then something inside at a lower level. But we don't need everything for that. That's a particular type of thing, and being able to do a notebook find like that with a nested function pattern, or whatever the heck we call it. Nested pattern. I don't know.
Another benefit of having a tree pattern versus expression patterns is that the tree structure of a notebook doesn't exactly line up with the expression structure of,
Doesn't it?
No, like symbolic notebook has head notebook, regardless of if there's a literal symbol notebook anywhere in your notebook.
Okay, well, we should see that then. But in the next meeting of this series, let's see the proposed structure of a notebook tree.
Okay.
Does that make sense? All right, I think we're really making good progress here. I really like this. I mean, this is seeming much more practical to me. So, okay, so first step is the round tripping of generic data structures and notebooks, okay, making that more sophisticated. With the additional hook that some of those things can be cell objects, notebook objects, which would allow you to push the thing to real time. Make sense? John Fultz, do you agree?
Mm-hmm.
That's one bucket. Okay. Then the second bucket, well, I think we've talked about the structured export of notebooks. I guess that there is another bucket which has to do with how much of the structure of a notebook do you pull in when you import it, and how much is that round trip? All right, we're making good progress here. There's more to do, but this is a good start. Right, let's wrap it up here, and please let's schedule another one in this series. I think this is useful.
Okay.
Make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. See you all soon.